Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tintina Gold Belt Breakfast. My name is Bill Stormont. I look after investor relations for Tectonic Metals. We've got a great session for you this morning. We've got the CEOs from Banyan Gold, Tara Christie, Rackla Metals, Simon Ridgway, Tony Retta from Tectonic, and Scott Bernal from Snowline Gold. Our session today is going to be moderated by Dr. Quinton Henning from Crescat Capital. Quinton, as many of you will know, is responsible for the technical and geologic directorship or direction at Crescat Capital. The format that we're going to be pursuing today is very much one of each CEO is going to have about 10 minutes to speak. It'll be moderated by Quinton, and each CEO will have 2 slides that they can refer to just to give a sense of how to support the technical aspects of their projects. And if we have time towards the end, we'll have some Q&A amongst the CEOs or Quinton and possibly the audience, depending on how we proceed. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Quinton, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Look, I think most of us would agree we seem to be entering a better time in the mining space. You know, the gold space, gold price is picking up, but the level of interest in the gold miners is starting to pick up. You know, you're starting to see a little bit of increase in volume and trading and so forth, and that's usually a good sign. I mean, you know, hopefully we've got a very bright future over the next few years. You know, but really stepping back and looking at the gold industry, there is a chronic shortage of inventory right now of high-quality gold projects. You know, the major miners, mid-tier miners, they need to grow, and they need to replace what they're mining very quickly. These Tintina-type gold deposits, you know, there's a lot of different names. You've heard reduced intrusion type gold systems. Tombstone is another name. You know, Fort Knox type. You know, there's a lot of different names given to these. But these systems can be just absolute dreams when it comes to gold mining. Why? Because they have attributes that make them very favorable. You know, metallurgy is fantastic typically. Most of these are free milling. That means, you know, that gold is relatively easy and low cost to recover. They happen to be low in sulfur as well. There's very little sulfide in the mineral assemblage. So you don't end up with really nasty things, you know, like acid mine drainage so much. And a lot of them even have a certain amount of buffering capacity. So, you know, these things can be, we'll call it environmentally friendly as far as mining goes. But they are also quite big, or at least they can be big. These systems are associated with very large geologic processes, you know, the development of plutons, basically large bodies of magma that usually form through melting of the lower crust. They come up, and then little apophyses, little like mushrooms come popping off of these magma bodies at depth, and they can form district scale gold plays. And the Tintina province, I like Craig's comment the other day that it's really not just a district, it's a province. This is a belt of geology that extends all the way from the western Northwest Territories all the way through far western Alaska. So this isn't just a district by any stretch. This thing goes for probably, 1,000 kilometers or so, I think. It's huge, okay? And this is a belt along which we find a number of these systems. Now, in my view, the exploration around these kind of died away some time ago. I mean, yes, we knew about Dublin Gulch and Brewery Creek, and you know, we knew these systems were there, and now we're starting to see mines being made from these. You know, like Eagle deposit, for example, is the most recent to come online. But I think we need a new gold, we'll call it a holy grail to pursue here. You know, you look back in the gold cycle in the 1980s, it was Carlin Gold. That was the big, you know, we'll call it regional province scale gold exploration focus. We need a new one of those. We basically need to start finding 90-odd million ounces a year to replace what's being mined on this planet. How do you do that? You look for elephants, okay? And this Tintina province is, I think, way overdue for serious exploration. It's been a delight to see Snowline and Banyan and others start exploring these things and making discoveries early on here, because I think we're going to see this, in my view, this is the center of gravity for gold, the gold cycle this go around. Okay, I think this is where you're going to see a lot of companies be successful with new discoveries. A lot of money will be made by investors who pay attention to this story. And there's a lot of these things. Again, they're like mushrooms. There's multitudes. There's literally dozens and dozens of targets of this type across this region. We're going to get a pretty good slice through the entire belt, the entire province today, because we have one story that is in the far west of the Northwest Territories, Rakla, who's at the eastern end of the province. But then we're going to go through Snowline. We've got, they're a bit further west in the Yukon, Banyan, a bit further west still. But then we're going to go clear over to the very western end of the whole province, and we're going to talk about tectonic. Now, these are 4 stories that we've invested in them. We feel are going to be on the cusp of starting this gold bull, kind of a long-lived, hopefully, exploration theme. But there's more. There's going to be more that pop up, and I think it'd be worth everyone's time to keep an eye on new companies, new stories, because there's a lot of targets like this that need to be tackled, and this is where I think we'll see a lot of very, very exciting news for many, many years. Okay, now the way we're going to handle this is really a panel. We've got our 4 guests up here, and I've got a few questions. They have prepared a couple of slides each. So what I'm going to do is go through company by company, starting with Tara, who's going to talk about Banyan Gold. And I've got a couple of prepared questions, but there will be time at the end of the session for questions from everyone. Okay, so roughly 10 minutes each for the 4 guests here, and then we will open up to the floor. We'll get some questions in from others. All right. So Tara is with Banyan Gold. I've known Tara for many years. Tara's an absolute delight as a Yukon native, and we have one other Yukon native down there. So these guys have really lived and breathed working in this region for their entire life, and it's an absolute delight to introduce Tara, who's going to tell us today about Banyan. But we want to know particularly what strategy they're using to explore. They've got a very, very large gold, absolutely extraordinarily large. If you're not familiar with it, please go to their website, check it out, because it is absolutely huge. And I look at it and I think, my gosh, how do you tackle something this big? So, Tara?
Great, thank you, Quentin. And you can see our project area there in the photograph, and you'll notice that low rolling hill and those swampy areas. Those are pretty hard to explore. You can get some soils, but we do have lots of till. There's no rock exposure. I look at some of our other people on this panel, I go, oh my gosh, just to be able to see a hillside with some rock in it, that would be fabulous. So, that's been a real challenge for us in our exploration strategy. And, the one thing I will say is that this is a pretty short timeline where we've come. We optioned this property in the summer of 2017. And yes, it came with a few soils and it came with some historic drilling, primarily in the airstrip area, which is in the front of that photograph. And we made the power line discovery, which goes from the top of that low rolling hill to the left all the way down to where the N is there in presentation in 2019, and now that's where we have 3 million ounces. So to really show you how our exploration strategy and how this has come together, I'm going to flip forward and show you a quick little video, which hopefully plays, and then I'm going to give you a few more details on it. There we go. Hi, Tara Christie, President and CEO of Banyan Gold. I want to give you a tour of our Ormac project, update you on our progress, and show you the vast exploration potential. First of all, Ormac is in the Mayo Mining District in the Tombstone Belt of the Yukon, Canada's newest mining district with over 16 million ounces of gold equivalent resources within a 40-kilometer radius of our project. We're located next to Victoria Gold, the newest gold producer with a planned production of 200,000 ounces per year, and their resource continues to grow. Also adjacent to us is Hecla, high-grade silver project. They're right on our northern boundary, and our project benefits from existing power lines, highways, substation, all-season roads, and even cell phone services, which are huge advantages for us. The property is 173 square kilometers, which we believe is prospective with over 16 kilometers of east-west strike. Our Nitra property off to the west gives us over 300 square kilometers in this district. It's very exciting for us as we believe there's considerable resource potential. As we zoom in on Ormac, you'll see the 4 million ounce resource at 0.6 grams per ton, constrained within 3 deposits, the airstrip, the power line, and the Oryx Hill. The gray shows the $1,700 pit shell that we use to constrain the resource. Airstrip is a calcareous replacement deposit. It dips about 60 degrees, and we believe once we drill it off, it will dip underneath the power line deposit at depth. The power line deposit is our largest resource with 3 million ounces contained within 1.2 kilometers of east-west strike, roughly 900 meters north to south. Power line, we believe, is contained within a unit which we see in the resistivity across 16 kilometers east to west. It is a sheeted vein system, and the concentrations of veins are contained within roughly horizontal layers within a metasedimentary host rock. The deposit also has a very low strip ratio, 0.34 to 1, which means mineralization starts on surface and near surface, which is hugely advantageous as you move into development. And we believe it's contiguous with our other resource, Oryx Hill, to the east. Mineralization at the Oryx Hill deposit is very similar to Powerline, with the same orientation of sheeted veins. As we believe Powerline and Oryx Hill are contiguous, our drilling this year will continue to build that connection between Powerline and Oryx Hill. In 2022, we drilled over 50,000 meters post-resource estimate, and we expanded the mineralized footprint both at Powerline and Oryx Hill to now over 5 kilometers of strike, particularly with the step-out holes which we drilled 2 kilometers east of Oryx Hill. With the 2023 drill program starting, every hole has the potential to continue to add ounces to what we believe is already a Tier 1 asset, which we plan to demonstrate with our resource update mid-year. Look forward to this tour being updated as we rapidly advance the Ormac project. So that answers most of your question, Quentin, but the other, the real challenge for us over the last couple of years is with no exposure, we've had to drill this fence of 100-meter spaced holes stepping out, and now we have a much bigger geochemical database, which is giving us all kinds of clues. We're going back and we're looking at the geophysics, which we only discovered after we'd made that power line discovery that the resistivity was corresponding to anything. And now we're going back and combining what we know from the LIDAR, structure, geochemistry, and I think that's going to be really exciting for us in 2023 because it's all starting to make more sense than it did before.
Very good. Look, that's a good overview, but I gotta say, like, on the technical side, I gotta ask this question because this is an unusual gold system for this type. Okay, this is predominantly hosted by country rock. Okay, the metasedimentary rocks are the host for this system. Most of these Tintina type are more or less directly associated with or hosted with the intrusion that produce them. Okay, so I guess I'd like you to talk about the host, but I would also like to ask you, because I think there's got to be a big intrusion driving this thing. Where's the mothership?
We're looking for the mothership. If I knew, we'd have drilled it already, but 2023, we're certainly hot on the chase for where we think it is. And what we've done and what we continue to do with looking at our database, looking at the structural story, trying to understand fluid flow directions, where it could potentially be. We're doing a lot of technical work. We're going to start drilling and probably a month here with some really exciting targets. So I don't know where it is yet, Quentin, because we haven't hit it, but you're absolutely right. We're outside. We're in the country rock. Somewhere there was a mothership that created all this mineralization. Is it on our property? Is it high grade? I don't know. And how far could it go? Like, what is the typical distance that these intrusions are from where you're seeing the grades and style of mineralizations that we are? I guess I'll ask you. I think that it can't be too far away.
No. These deposits are usually close to home, but I guess the point I would make is that although you've been wildly successful with what you found to date, there could be something bigger and better lurking like right around the corner here somewhere, okay? The magmatic source for this could host something extraordinary. So I'm very, very hopeful that Banyan vectors in on that. And
We're working on it.
else-
Maybe we should have a contest like the Integra guys did with who picks the best drill hole on where the intrusion is.
Yes, I would be supportive of that. I think if you provide all the data, I think there's a few people in the audience here I know who would love to pick a drill hole or two. So, look, it's an amazing story, and it's one of quite a few that I think will unfold here. Now, I'm going to move to Simon Ridgway. Simon is with Rackla Metals. Rackla, of course, is geographically is part of the Yukon province. So it's not part of the Tintina belt, but it's the belt that caused a lot of excitement just 10, 12 years ago, we'll call it, with the discovery of Carlin mineralization up in the Yukon. Now, a lot of people. They look back at that period, and it was quite exciting seeing these Carlin discoveries being made. But there is a challenge with them. Okay, they're basically refractory deposits. They're metallurgically, they're not as friendly as these. Yet here you have these Tintina type sitting literally right next to these other systems that are refractory. But these, even at lower grade, these can be very, very wildly economic deposits. So where I'm going to start with Rackla, look, what got you inspired, Simon, to start looking
back to the
this?
Tombstone? So
Yep.
I come back to that Yukon natives again. I started out in the Tombstone belt back in the early mid-70s. My first company I listed was called Tombstone, which was a tough sell, as Peter will tell you, because I think you financed me on it, and it was just the name itself was a bit negative as far as listing a company goes, but I got it there. But from that, I went to Latin America for many years and worked down there. So, some mid last year, I saw the results that Snowline was putting out, and actually where the deposit was, and you're way over in the eastern side of the territory. And for the most part, all the historic mines have been on the western side of the territory, up in Alaska or in just north of Dawson City. So you kind of opened up that belt for me again, thinking of two things. One, you don't need a big placer deposit to have these big systems. You can be quite discreet. Because previously, Fort Knox, all the deposits that have been found, Clear Creek, they all had these alluvial gold deposits pointing the way to where you're going to make the discovery for the hard rock deposit. What Snowline found didn't have that. So for me, that opened up that belt. And I had to sort of move a bit further out of the Yukon territory because I knew that savvy explorationists like Scott and his dad were not going to have any prospects right around where they made the discovery that I could go looking for. The history, well, it's sort of common knowledge in the Yukon was that as this belt moved east into the Northwest Territories, it became gold poor and tungsten rich. So that eastern side, as it went into the NWT, was not supposed to have gold with it. But after hearing about the discovery, I began looking at the geochemistry, looking at the data of the government geochem and work that had been done previously by other exploration companies. And the signature was gold bismuth. It wasn't gold, it wasn't tungsten. So it seemed pretty evident to me that those border intrusives were prospective. And the more I dig, the better it looked. And there was a lot of open ground there, and there's very little open ground in the Yukon. So I went into the Northwest Territories, compiled the data, and took a look and went up there staking. And as I staked some ground on the border intrusives, I looked at some other areas that were kind of owned by juniors, but the juniors, they didn't even know they had the ground because the Yukon did that. They prevented staking in some areas, but they grandfathered lots of the ground that was staked already. So it was very cheap to get quite a big land position on that, along that border of the Northwest Territories. And I'll just step to that now if we can. Oh, where are we going? There we go. So you see on the right side of the slide where the land position I picked up is, it's actually kind of half on the NWT, a little bit in the Yukon. And, you know, when I saw the geochemistry and the fact that these intrusive bodies themselves had not been prospected because people had looked at this belt for the Carlin style, it meant I had to get back into the Yukon and get back in those territories and start working on these tombstone sweet intrusives again. I think we have a great land position. It's really pretty early stage. Unlike most companies on the bench, we don't have a discovery yet, but so we're much cheaper to get into. I think we have some great exploration targets coming. So that's the reason I got into the belt, back into the belt again, because I always loved looking for these intrusives back then.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about what you have then. So, you know, broadly, how does, you know, exploration for this style of deposit?
Well, basically, you know when you're looking for the Rackler style mineralization, funny, the company that I put in there is called Rackler because we did look at those Carlin hosted type of deposits. But they're mostly gold arsenic. So these intrusive related deposits are gold bismuth for the most part. And when I took a look at the geochemistry of the companies that had worked on those border intrusives, it was all gold bismuth. There was very little tungsten in the geochemistry. And there was one project especially that had been worked by Newmont, they did a significant stream sediment survey all the way down the border of the Northwest Territories and the Yukon on the MWT side, and they made a pretty significant gold geochem discovery at the southern end of that belt. But then they focused all their work on the sediments, looking for the Carlin style mineralization. They spent a few $1 million putting, you know, big soil surveys in, as you can see on the slide there. So they identified 2 or 3 targets with some very good results. You know, 30 meters of 17 grams gold, 20 meters of 3 or 4 grams gold, but in the sediments. But when you take a look at the geochemistry of those discoveries, they were gold bismuth, tellurite, very little arsenic. So I think they just looked at the wrong target. They did not go inside the intrusive. They kept all their work in the sediments, even though all the streams that were draining showed strong gold bismuth. So it seemed like a pretty evident target to pick up. So we have about 35,000, 40,000 hectares of ground along those border intrusives. Most of it has got great geochemistry. Like the Astro target, some of it's got great targets that we could put a rig on right away. But we'll advance those targets a little bit more, big groundwork, but I hope to be drilling by the end of June and testing these targets that were found by Newmont, but not tested. That's pretty much the pitch.
So I'm going to kind of summarize a lot of what you just said to synthesize it, because I think one of the takeaways here is to understand how you can find these systems. When Simon talks about, you know, previous work, in this case by Newmont, you know, one of the best ways to identify these systems is using stream sediment geochemistry, because these are big systems. They do often have placer deposits associated with them. You know, Fort Knox and Fairbanks, huge placer district. Okay, and even in the Yukon, I think a lot of the gold in the Yukon is associated with this. But you can really hone in on, you know, which granites are productive, you know, potentially, you know, gold bearing, and also which parts of the granites might be the most prospective very quickly using stream sediment sampling. Okay, so that's one of the best techniques. But then, you know, doing what you see here, doing soil grids, very, very effective approach, you know, to identify your
But not in the sediments. You got to get inside the intrusive.
Understand, but, you know, the point is, you know, you start throwing soil grids over your target area.
Right.
And now that we better recognize that the Tintina type are the target here, you know, you lay out grids, and that's what a lot of these guys have done to identify these gold projects. Is they've done, you know, maybe start with ridge and spur sampling, where you just simply go along the ridges and the spurs, and where, you know, it's easy to hike, and you collect soil samples every 50 meters or 100 meters, something like that. And then when you start to see areas light up, then you put a grid, like a 50-meter grid over an area to try to better define the target. But they're relatively easy systems to look for. Geophysically, there's not a lot to work with these things. They have very low sulfide, so they don't stand out as like chargeability anomalies or something like that. They can stand out as resistivity anomalies because the granite, the host for these, is often electrically resistive. So that's one thing that might help focus on your prize. But really, these are driven. The exploration is driven by geochemical
And prospecting. I mean,
Yeah,
these are big, gray, kind of boring-looking bodies. So if you don't walk up the creeks, you don't make the discovery, right? I mean, in Snowline, the discovery you made was by getting up that one creek with the outcrop, right? I mean, you're dealing with very large areas, and normally, as an explorationist, you're looking for alteration. You're looking for color alteration. Whereas in these bodies, they're just gray and boring.
Yeah.
And you tend to stick to the sediment where the color is. Yeah. But you just got to get up those creeks.
The reason they're called tombstone type is because the rock is literally granite. It looks like something you'd make a tombstone from.
Right.
So, what Simon is saying is these often do not have flash alteration. Like there's not a big anomaly that's readily apparent. You have to literally walk up the creek and look for
the ground.
Look for sheeted veining if there's any outcrops, things like this. Obviously they can be hosted by the sediments or the granite too. So what looks very innocuous can actually turn out to be a big gold system.
A big gold system.
Yeah,
Exactly.
All right, let's talk with Tony here. Look, now, did you have any slides? Because I'm just going to fire away.
I went a bit rogue here. I think that we do have 2 slides.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Look, Tectonic is an Alaskan-focused exploration company. And Tony, Rita, we've known Tectonic now for about 2 or 3 years. I think we've been invested. First, we're looking at the pogo-style mineralization that they were pursuing. But this flat project, which is in western Alaska, has been in their portfolio now for a couple of years. And it was a delight to see them advance this thing here recently. Late last fall, I think they did some boots on the ground work. But I did get a chance to look in detail at the flat project, and right away could see that this is a big intrusive related system. I mean, the historic drilling that was done on this property, which dates back to the 1980s, really to the era when Fort Knox was being explored. This looks like a beast, and one of the supporting lines of evidence that this could be a very, very large intrusive hosted system or associated system is the fact that it's very close to Donlin Creek. It's just north of Donlin Creek. So we have basically a project that is just north of the largest unmined gold system in North America. But in this case, metallurgy was the key. And if you want to make a gold deposit work, especially in a remote area, you got to have good metallurgy. So I want to start there. You tell me.
Yeah.
You tell folks what you think we should expect out of the metallurgy.
Kind of a loaded question, but I think maybe to backpedal a bit, it's important to note that there was 55 holes drilled at flat historically. That was predominantly by Fairbanks Gold and Robert Friedland, who actually was involved with Fort Knox. So to the benefit of us, our native partner, Doyon Limited, who's the landowner, actually stored a majority of that drill core in a warehouse. So our business model is centered around managing risk, and every project we acquired, we look at it from a mining perspective. And to that point, what makes or breaks any project is metallurgy. So we decided to kick off our exploration campaign last year by doing metallurgy. Obviously, we feel very confident that it's going to come back positive. There are good indications based on the fact that there's 1.4 million ounces of placer gold. Chicken Mountain's the intrusive that sits on a hill, but every stream around that is carrying gold, placer gold. So that tells us the gold's been liberated naturally. Then when we took samples from the drill core, we did our characterization results, we did cyanide soluble shake tests, and there is less than 0.1% sulfur in the system. There's no preg robbing. It appears the gold could just fall out. And so we launched this program, and we actually expect to have results this month, finally from the lab. So, it's an iterative process. We're doing bottle rolls, float, gravity, and the benefit there is that the drilling that we do this year, there'll be context.
Okay.
Assuming obviously we hit gold mineralization, a shareholder or investor can look at that drill intercept and say, this is not like a feasibility stage type of MET program, but it'll give you insight into whether or not this could be a free milling opportunity. More importantly, or just as importantly, to take that one step further, we view this as a heap leach opportunity. Now, that's a big, bold claim, and I don't have any columns to support that, but early indications are that this could be an open pit free milling opportunity, and that to me is a game changing. To have that in a first world jurisdiction is remarkable, and obviously that lowers the CapEx, the OpEx, and can really change the scope of this project.
Good. Okay, so that is very good to hear. And it's good to hear, the metallurgy being done early. Okay, I'm a strong advocate for that because a lot of companies go out and chase gold in particular, and they don't do the metallurgy. And so oftentimes that company will go down a rabbit hole. They'll basically be exploring a gold deposit that based on its metallurgy would likely never be viable. Okay, and the more I think people get educated around that, and metallurgy sounds like an esoteric field, but it is absolutely critical to make a mine work. Okay, and the more people understand about it, the better. Okay, so anybody that has time this weekend, get on Google and start looking up gold, refractory, free milling. Look up these words, figure out what they mean. It's important. Okay, now I'm going to do a little summation of what Tony just said. Look, with these Tintina types, and Fort Knox mine near Fairbanks is a benchmark. They're what we call free milling. Okay, the gold is particulate. It's in the little veinlets, and it's usually unencumbered by other minerals. It's not like trapped in sulfides and stuff. So at Fort Knox, they actually started the operation way back in the mid-1990s as a milling operation. It was running just under a gram per ton. And back in that day and age, that was crazy. You're going to mill rock and produce a gram per ton. That was, it's one of the first deposits, low-grade deposits that was milled like this. But it worked very, very well. Why? Because the gold comes out very, very easily. Okay, but then as time went on, they realized, okay, we've got all these lower grade resources, 0.x gram type stuff around. What do? They start heap leaching. Okay, so Fort Knox actually has both a mill and a heap leach. But now you're starting to see as these deposits get developed, like the Eagle mine in the Yukon, they're heap leach. Okay, so that's likely the trajectory for a lot of these discoveries. They will become heap leach deposits. If the grade is high enough, they might justify milling. But either way, the gold is easily extractable, either in a mill or in a heap leach. And that's what we want to see. Okay, next question. Won't beat that up too much. Next question. You got Donnelly Creek to the south. And Donnelly Creek happens to be a refractory deposit. Okay, it is a bit higher grade. It's like 2.5 or 3 grams or something. But it is refractory. Okay, and that is one of the biggest challenges, why it's not advanced like people. They're like, why hasn't this been mined, Well, it's got a refractory nature to it, all right? So it's not that it can't be done, it's just going to take some more science and work and time and money. But you're just to the north of Donnelly Creek, okay? You're basically in the same province, probably the same driver for, type of driver for the system. Why is yours free milling, and why is Donnelly? Is it zonation? What is it? You tell me.
Great question. So when we first acquired this project, maybe I'll give a bit of history again here. The intrusion-related gold system, the Tintina Gold Province, yes, those are obviously advantageous and things that you need to, obviously caused us to look into this area. But really, it started with, can the Kuskokwim mineral belt, which hosts Donlin and is within the Tintina Gold Province, produced another 40 million ounce gold deposit. And to my shock, there was no one else in the belt at that time, in that Kuskokwim mineral belt. My fear was that although we can find size, would it be a refractory deposit? As I started to dig through the data, the placer mining component, Donlin doesn't have that. Fort Knox does. That was key. And we're on the other side of the fault. So although we're in the same mineral belt, and it's debated, I mean, there's smarter people than me, obviously, whether or not Donlin is a true intrusion-related gold system or not. We're not Donlin by any stretch.
Is it intrusive?
Well, ask Craig Hart. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know. But the point is, the more I looked at Flat, our project, the more it reminds me of Fort Knox. And I'm not a Fort Knox expert either, but I have been to Fort Knox. I've had the benefit of touring that mine and doing a deep dive into some of the geology and things of that nature there. The quartz-sheeted veins, things of that nature. So if you look at the Craig Hart model, and I'm not an expert, but the bismuth, tellurium, tungsten that's associated with Fort Knox, we have some of that, but we don't have all of that. So I think the zonation plays a role with it. But what I'm believing, and Quentin, kind of led this, steered us in this direction, is that there could be a Fort Knox underneath the current drilling, because where we see high-grade mineralization at Flat, we tend to get bismuth and tellurium. And so there could be a Fort Knox below, and these structures are leaking out fluids, and that could be another prize. So, this wasn't necessarily planned, but we do have this cross-section here that highlights the drilling. And to date, so you're looking at Chicken Mound here, but to date, there's those 55 drill holes all hit gold mineralization. They were done by 2 different companies predominantly, but the average vertical depth of drilling is only 100 meters vertical. I would challenge any explorationist here, drill 55 holes and try to hit gold in every hole. And then I challenge you to either 25 out of 55 ended in mineralization. So drill 25 holes and let's see if you can end them all in mineralization. And this is interesting because, again, some of those high-grade intercepts have that Fort Knox signature. And then we have another target, which is not on the screen, called Golden Apex. It has a volcanic cap rock. It's in the Hornsfeld. And around it, the golden soil is carrying Fort Knox geochemistry. So is this an intact system? It's quite remarkable. So we're not Donlin because of the placer gold, the geochemical signature, and you could say where we sit in the sort of the Craig Hart intrusion-related gold model. I don't know, Quentin, what else? What am I missing there?
No, that's the point. But I think you're at the top of Fort Knox type system personally. And while there's a bit of bismuth and tellurium in some of this drilling, it's predominantly kind of a light arsenic flavor, we'll call it. It's not heavy arsenic like Donlin, but it's what you would expect to find as a halo around a Fort Knox type system. And so I think once they start drilling here, either a bit deeper, it's not going to be wildly deeper, just a bit deeper, or somewhere lurking about within the broader footprint of the gold system here, I think you'll find the mothership, like the actual core of the system, which should be predominantly bismuth and tellurium. And what does it mean for investors? It means they could have the entire system preserved here. So it's a very, very exciting story from that standpoint. You also look at the scale and dimensions of what's been done here. I mean, imagine drilling 50-odd holes across an area, I think around 4 kilometers across, and every hole hits gold. Okay, you got to think in 3 dimensions. If horizontally your gold system is 4 kilometers across, you think it might go on the ground a little ways? I think so. Okay, so there's a lot of runway right below them. I mean, look at these drill holes. Most of them end in mineralization. Okay, that's crazy. This is like tip of the iceberg type stuff. So anyway, look, you want to follow?
Yeah, no, I just want to say that the model is important, obviously, but what's just as important is chasing gold. So do you chase gold or do you chase the model? And it's probably a hybrid approach. The model was kind of secondary for us. What you see here on this slide is 2.6 kilometers. So the volume of rock or tonnage that warrants more exploration and more drilling. If you look at the resource dimensions of Fort Knox, it's about 2 Ks by 500 meters. You could fit one in there. You could fit a couple. And if you look at the above image there, the golden soil anomaly, that image is actually cut off, but less than 50% of that golden soil anomaly has been drill tested. And golden soil anomalies are everywhere, and especially in the Tintina, but when you have drilling that's validated that golden soils can produce bedrock mineralization, it gives you confidence that the golden soil footprint, which is about 4 Ks by 600 meters, 800 meters in some points, could be representative of a large system below. So although we are utilizing the model, there's a lot of gaps in there where you could delineate a multi-million ounce resource. So for us, we don't doubt the scale. For us, it's the economics. And that's why we're doing metallurgy. And the drilling this year is going to feed into some preliminary scoping type of stuff that we're doing internally, because at the end of the day, we want to know, finding gold's one part of the equation, but is it economic? And that's extremely important, especially with these types of deposit styles, and especially when you're in the north and it can be considered somewhat remote.
Excellent, excellent. Exciting story coming up. All right, it is an absolute delight to introduce Scott Birdall this morning. Known Scott and his dad for a long time. Prospectors out of the Yukon, they've done an extraordinary job of acquiring a portfolio of projects across the eastern Yukon that I think are some of the highest quality projects in any junior company I've ever seen in my life. And I remember when they started drilling in 2021, so 2 years ago, and they were focused on the Jupiter prospect and started absolutely hitting some extraordinary intercepts of vein, gold. This is orogenic style gold at Jupiter. And then late in the season, Scott says, we might have hit something else down there at Rogue. And he puts out this news release saying they hit granites, or granodiorite, I think it is, and veining, like sheeted veinings. Okay, so they might have a Tintina type. And I could see, like, right away, this guy's onto something. So, but what you got to understand is, because Scott and his dad have been here a long time, they know this place like the back of their hand. Okay, so they've literally gone around and greedily staked every bloody mushroom within sight. Okay, so these guys have not just Valley. I mean, Valley's an extraordinary story, an amazing success, but they have many, many targets. So Scott, a lot of people, investors, they say, oh my gosh, we missed the boat. Snowline's had a run here. Have I missed the boat? What do you tell people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we've obviously had a nice run up on a nice discovery, and it's been interesting though, because I've heard that question from the start. When we go from 20 cents to 50 cents, you get people telling you, I missed the boat, and it's also been interesting hearing certain questions where it's either too early or you missed the boat, and often at the same time. And in some cases, too early, and then you hit something, and then the same person comes back and says, I missed the boat. But it is what it is. That's the world that we live in, and investing is tough. But ultimately, if you look at it from a risk profile, what we've done now, like if you asked me to, assign a certain confidence or an expected value on the discovery when we were at 50 cents, on the back of, some interesting numbers last season, it was really anyone's guess. And so if you multiply the expected probability of success by the size of that success, you're going to come up with one number. And if you look at what we've done now in establishing this foundation with an aggressive drill program with just 12,000 meters total drilling at Valley, we are, we've clearly outlined, at least partially outlined, a very large and high-grade reduced intrusion-related gold system. And so the probability side of that equation has become substantially stronger. And so yes, the upside from $2.50 or whatever we're trading around at today versus 50 cents. Sure, for the same discovery, the upside is going to be less, but the expected value is so much higher, and that's just looking at that one discovery, as you mentioned.
So we haven't missed the boat.
Thank you. That's he's an actual communicator. That's well said. You haven't missed the boat. I'll try to memorize that one. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this kind of echoes a lot of the points that are made. You look at some of the drill holes that we put together here, and the continuity between holes really tells a story. I mean, we're pre-resource, and we're working towards that. But when you look down some of these individual drill holes, for example, hole 10 being 319 meters at 2.5 grams per ton from surface, the top 108 meters of that hole average 4.1 grams per ton, and it's not a high-grade vein that's smeared out over a bunch of low-grade mineralization. It's just wildly mineralized, consistently mineralized. I believe 72% of the assays in that top 108 meters are above 2 grams per ton, and only 5 are below 1 gram per ton. So it's actually hard to find mineralization in that hole that's less than a gram per ton, at least in that top stretch. And so with that continuity within holes, and then looking at that scale, even though our current drilling is at spacing wider than what we could put into a resource estimate at this point, the fact that you have continuity at that same scale within the holes speaks a lot to the continuity between holes. And then similarly, just talking about metallurgy, that's important to us too, and that's something we're onto right now. We've just launched a metallurgical program. And in the top right of that slide, you can see what we see so far in terms of just looking at the petrography of the rocks. And that work is actually done by Lawrence Hamill, who's here now, an undergraduate student doing fantastic work with us. And yeah, we're seeing gold as primarily native gold along grain boundaries, fairly fine, and it's really what we want to see at this point. Of course, we need to do the metallurgical testing to know for sure, but that's why we're undertaking it now, and that'll be a big de-risking event when we get those results back. And I guess a lot of the rhetoric. There's a term floating around called the next snow line, and so I'd like to throw our hat into the ring as well, because there's the we have a lot of targets in our portfolio, and there's the old adage that the best place to find a mine is next to one, and Valley sure looks a lot like it could become a mine, and so looking in that vicinity, it certainly seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, you got on the order of 30 targets, I think, across your portfolio there. Tell us how you're going to prioritize things. I think what people got to understand is, while Valley has turned out wildly successful, there are numerous other Tintina type targets across your ground, Rogue and Cynthia and so forth, and now the new ground that you picked up. Tell us how you're going to prioritize some of those. What are you going to do?
Yeah, well, it's a results-based iterative approach, and so we've been very active across our portfolio. The drill results obviously grab the headlines and grab the attention, but we have been advancing targets and keeping our crews very busy with sort of a holistic approach to this property package. And so looking at how those deposits stack up against each other, or sorry, I shouldn't say deposits at this point, that's a very forward-looking statement, but targets. But essentially, we know that Valley is mineralized and unusually well mineralized, and so we're very keen to test the targets that are in that same plutonic complex. And we've drilled a few holes at a covered intrusion called Gracie, which is just 4 kilometers from Valley. We actually didn't hit the intrusion, so we're still looking and we're still waiting assay results. But we did see in sparse veins that are the same orientation at Valley, the same mineralogy with visible gold in the drill core there. And so that's that's a pretty exciting indicator right out of the gate. And there are other intrusions in that same system. And then to the south, we recently picked up a whole other mid-Cretaceous aged reduced intrusion complex called Golden Ole. And so those are pretty intriguing as well. And, we get a lot of, I guess, questions about the location at Valley, which is actually not that bad. If you look at the global scheme of where deposits are developed and what the challenges are, there is a nice access route to Valley, but Golden Ole has the added benefit of being right by the North Canal Road, and so we're excited to get out there as well. And again, it's one of those situations where maybe, based on the back of the Valley discovery and seeing what we saw there, being able to pick it up from a company that might not have realized its significance. I mean, who knows? We'll see after we explore it in more detail, but certainly it looks promising at this point.
Look, that's awesome. Look, we met with a lot of representatives out of Yukon back in September at the Beaver Creek show, and I can tell you, like the support for this exploration and future building mines here it's tremendous in the Yukon. If anything, you just need more people. Need labs too. Oh my gosh, don't get me started. Okay, but no, the future is very bright. Look, I think that's the takeaway everyone should have here is that the Tintina province could be, think for the older folks here, think way back to the early 1980s and when you started to hear the word Carlin type deposit. And then all of a sudden there was just this chain of discovery in Nevada, one after another, these multi-million ounce deposits. That's what we need to see to revitalize the gold industry. And where do you do that? Where do you find something, especially in a first world country? Here, I think this is it. This is where we're putting a lot of our money at Crescat, and I think these stories are exceptional. There's probably going to be more that pop up, so keep your eyes open. But look, I want to take the last 15 minutes here, and I want to hold to 8:40. We're going to shut this off, but I want to open it up to people that might have questions. The one thing I would ask is that whoever asks a question, could you please do it loudly so that everybody in the room can hear? I'll try to reiterate it if people can't hear. Yes, sir.
Hi. You talked a lot about the cornfields that often surround these things, either in metal sediments or other rocks. How large do you think this cornfield's footprint could be?
Would you like to take a stab at that, Tarek? Okay, so basically the question.
We know about
There you go.
already,
Okay.
and we expect it's actually quite a bit larger. These are very big systems.
You got to think big because these systems, like, it's not just lateral big, it's down in the crust big. Okay, so these things form at 5 kilometers or so, or maybe even more in cases.
And we're not chasing it deep either, because an economic pit, if this is an open pit heap leach project's probably 200 meters, so we shut off lots of our holes in mineralization, and very similar to yours, 5 kilometers, and we have no problem continuing to drill holes and find gold stepping out.
Yeah.
But again, we're not chasing it to depth until we have a better sense of where the prize might be.
You're
Deep
still-
holes are exponentially
You're
expensive.
still, like he's pointed out, you're still exploring in the hornfels. The hornfels is simply a term for the rock around the granite that was cooked up by the heat of the granite. Okay, so basically you're exploring what we call the Oreo around the system. And again, where that mothership might be, that's up for debate and hopefully up for discovery here.
Well, we think we got some ideas. Our team's working really hard on that.
Good.
There's a new marketing campaign that started with the government. It's called Critical Minerals. And everybody in this room knows that gold is a critical mineral, but that's not the focus that's coming out. Lots of companies are buying on board. Do you think that's
Oh, boy.
easier to us raising money in this space?
So this is the great debate that has emerged over the past few months, couple of years maybe, is gold exploration dead, is what I think we were saying. It basically is it going to be that gold mining, like pure gold plays, have appeal like they used to? I think they will, simply driven by the fact that a lot of major mining companies need to find big deposits that can produce a lot of gold to replace what they're motoring through. Now, does it mean we shouldn't also be looking for copper gold systems things like that. No, we need to find those as well, okay? I think you'll see things evolve, but I think stories like this will definitely have an appeal. Now, there's one thing I'm gonna throw out there that is sounds a bit esoteric, but these systems, like a couple of people have mentioned, have some unusual metals in them, particularly bismuth and tellurium. And it so happens that tellurium is, we'll call it one of those metals that we're gonna need. Now, there's not a lot of tellurium in these, not a lot of bismuth either, but there's enough that it could be a significant critical metal byproduct from some of these operations. I remember going to Fort Knox way back in 1996. It was like right after they started. And of course, they had the shaker tables because a lot of the gold is gravity recoverable. And I remember seeing these streams of gray mineral coming off the table. Imagine if all of that tellurium and bismuth had been captured. You know, today we can do it. We got brand new ones. So maybe there's some more value to these than just the gold. It's my spin. How about that? Okay. Anybody else? Sure.
Another question. We're talking maybe to Simon here. Yukon has its own peculiar challenges with regards to permitting. How do you find, or how do you expect the Northwest Territories to be?
I'll let you know in a few months. I mean, the project we have is permitted for another 3 years at the moment. So we have on the project we'll be drilling it. We have no issue. I've been told by the government of the NWT that it's a lot easier than Yukon, but we're just starting that process now. You know, because the target we're going to be drilling is permitted till I think 2025. So we're good to go there. But I could, you know, I think in the room here we have Scott, who's working with me. And he was head of the Geological Survey of the Yukon for the last 7 years, and maybe he could have some comments on permitting in the NWT. Is Scott here? What do you think, Scott?
Well, it's a process. Of course, I've been very focused on activity in the Yukon for the last few years, and I know it's getting more difficult. I'm not overly familiar with the Northwest Territories side. Unfortunately, we don't have to deal with that, as Simon said, for the next few years. But you got to do your groundwork, get your discussions in early, and be patient.
Yeah, patience and permitting, they go together pretty well, don't they?
The 2 Ps.
Yeah, the 2 Ps in a pot.
All right, any other questions? Going, gone. Okay, look, it's 8:32. A lot of people got to get out and start buying stocks, and hopefully these 4 in particular. So we'll let you go. Pleasure to have you all this morning.
Thank you, everyone,
Okay,
for attending.
thanks, yeah.